Thank you. Call our meeting back to order out of executive session, and we do excuse Commissioner Shainfeld, who had a previous engagement elsewhere. So the four commissioners here, we do have two items of action to take out of executive session. So Commissioner Wendling.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I would like to make a motion to approve a letter of intent and authorize the chairman to sign.
Thank you. I have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you. Commissioner Lloyd.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to approve the Southwest Counseling Budget Agreement between them and the county
And
Authorized.
and authorize the chairman to sign all necessary documents.
thank you. I think there'll be one. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Thank you. For the good of the order, what can we share here, commissioners?
I'll go first if you're okay, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lloyd.
All right. Hey, just hit a few board meetings. I wasn't able to go to the library meeting or the events complex, but I did have conversations with both directors of the organization. I also attended the Southwest Counseling board meeting. So been pretty busy. Also been working on a project with Eric Bingham and for planning and zoning and Gene out of engineering based upon something we'll be seeing in the next couple of weeks at a meeting after the next planning and zoning meeting. So that's been taking some time. And then lastly, excited that I've been asked to go present tonight at the Green River Student Council on how to run an effective meeting. So I'm going to give them all the things we do and tell them go up as I just teasing, but no, that will be a good thing. But that's been pretty much where I've been the last couple of weeks.
Thank you, Commissioner Lloyd, and best of luck with that. Anything else for good of the order?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Tolman.
I attended the University of Wyoming School of Energy, Discovering Energy Solutions for Wyoming last week. It was an all-day workshop, finding new ways to close the loop by reducing waste and new uses for waste products like the CO2 and the coal. And they had a brick that they had developed that made out of coal that's lighter than a regular mortar type brick. And it was a very interesting presentation. The core CM means carbon ore, rare earth, and critical minerals. So that's what the research has been through the University School of Energy. Very interesting presentation.
They have a building down there made of that. If you
Brick?
get down to Laramie, yeah,
Oh.
they've got a brick building that you can go see. That's
Yep.
Made of coal.
yeah.
The sad part is, it's like the timber industry. They had the mine manager from camera there, Crank. And the sad part is the coal mines will be shut down before any of this new technology could be implemented. So you're still looking at loss of infrastructure and having to redevelop infrastructure for the new uses of some of our minerals.
Thank you. Anything else? Anything else for good of the order? And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. We adjourn that meeting and head right into our policy and procedure workshop. And we have Mr. McLean with us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, County Commissioners. Before we get started on Chapter 8, wanted to address something that Commissioner Wendling had brought up at the last meeting, kind of addressing sort of a schedule to get this wrapped up during the term. And so what looks like is workable today, we're going to go through 8, which is a longer chapter, but we've addressed some of the things before, but we'll go through 8 today. At the next meeting on 11/15, we'll address 9, 10, and 11. 10, we had addressed earlier in part with some changes. We'd approved to 10 and they're shorter sections. And then on 12.6, we'll address chapter 12 and any other cleanup items that we have at that time and be prepared to, before the end of the year, adopt the any and all changes with that. So if that's okay with the board, that seems like a reasonable schedule from our end. So just to be clear, if we're okay with that on, next week with the regular stuff, 9, 10, and 11 will go out together to the department heads and elected officials. And then we'll address that at the 11:15 meeting, those 3 sections. And then on 12.6, we'll do chapter 12 and any other loose ends that we have, and then be prepared to adopt it either at that meeting or the second meeting in December.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Chapter 8, this section has to do with absences from work, and obviously there's lots of reasons for absences. Probably the way there's not a lot of changes, at least from our end, that are in there, but the changes that are in there are to try to make sure that the policies and practices are aligned. You know how over time you develop practices and it's not exactly what's said, or it's not addressed at all. So we tried to make sure that in a lot of these areas with leave, that the policies and practices are aligned. One of those areas as an example of that is with respect, this would be on page 3 under paragraph B. One of the leave that's important, John's familiar with this for lots of reasons, but as you know, when we have officers involved in shootings or other reasons to investigate, we need a paid administrative leave to put them on pending the completion of an investigation. There's also some times where there's other things going on where that's needed. So we've made sure to include that in there. That was, again, part of our practice, but we hadn't really addressed that specifically. So that's in there.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wendland.
Yeah, Gary, unadministrated leave. Who approves that?
So it's both the department head and human resources.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know when I was in school business and wanted to use administrative leave, I found out after I used it, the only one that could approve it was the board.
Yeah.
Yeah. We don't meet that much or get together.
Yeah, no. So there's a couple things that are significant about that. One is that you've got some employees that are for cause. And so if you put them on unpaid leave, you've already created a harm. You'd end up in a lawsuit. Sure. The second thing is that sometimes when you have an investigation, you don't want to have the problem of an officer, an employee being caught up in all of, or causing problems with that. And sometimes you just need time to figure out what the heck's going on. And so, there was a time when we didn't have much of a review process, and I think it's fair to say it was abused a little bit. So now it goes through the normal munis process where the department head or elected official approves and then I approve it. And that's how that's done. Yeah.
Thank you.
So we added a definition and a little cleanup in there. Probably the biggest area, and this will probably continue to be a challenge, is in addressing, this is starts on page 4, section 3, which addresses occupational injuries and illnesses.
Gary, before we go there.
Yeah.
There was no change, but I'd like to have a discussion talking about H on bereavement leave. And I noticed our employees shall be entitled to 3 days based on 8-hour day.
Yeah.
But then when I go down and it talks with, go to number 2, employees shall be entitled to 1 day. Well, first of all, up above 3 days for immediate family.
That's right. Yeah. That's current
purpose
policy.
for immediate family, which includes this. But then it turns around and says employees shall be entitled to 1 day leave for other family members.
Yeah.
I find that difficult because if it's, I happen to say my bride, her mother passed away and she's living out in California. And there's that close relationship, or brother-in-law or sister-in-law. If I only get one day to go and she gets 3, I sure as the world don't want to see her out there by herself.
Sure.
May not have vacation leave and that. Is there a reason these things aren't matched up?
You know, Doc, this has been a longstanding policy. We've addressed this a few times. It just hasn't been changed. I think it's just a judgment call as to how far we want to extend that. I don't think anybody would ever argue with more.
No.
And some of us have extended family that are more important and closer to us than our
Good point.
our blood relative family. So, I mean, I've not really had any feedback from anybody on this, that it's been a problem. So the only thing that I would say in here is we have fairly liberal vacation accrual issues. And certainly department heads and elected officials have the ability to prove. And as you know, during COVID, we saw this a lot because of the ability to schedule funerals or the ability to get places. The time it took to even manage services or to hold services was days and weeks for some folks. And so, yeah, I think it's trying to find that balance between, you know, using the time that you've accrued, which I think is fairly liberal, and having another leave. But that just really it's really a policy call. I'm open to.
Well, you said something that was very key, and I agree with you, is sometimes our extended family is closer to us than our own family. And I just really, you know, for purposes of just to make it right, in my mind, I think they should be in line with each other. I think if for other family members if we're going to do family employee for immediate family, there's 3 days, then, you know, combine them both, get them, you know, get it in line where, hell, it's 3 for both or 5 for both or 1 for both. But either way, we know one's not enough, and it's not right. You know, I could see if someone walked in and said, hey, I live locally. I want to take more than 3 days. Okay, use your vacation time or take, you know, but if they don't live locally, you know, I just don't think they should have to if immediate family doesn't have to.
Yeah, I mean, your
Take
point's well
vacation.
taken. If you look, if we were to do a survey, and we haven't probably done that formally, but I can tell you that, as you know, it's a little more at the district, school district, both school districts, and the union environments obviously are a little higher. They might even be 5 or something on that. So I think there is a little bit of room for discussion in there. I think, you know, whatever, you know, we're
I
comfortable.
personally would like to ask my fellow commissioners their thoughts about changing in 2 from 1 day to 3 days, keep 2 and 1 in line, or H in line, or combine, you know. That's my thoughts.
It's very well laid out here who's included.
Mhm.
So perhaps this is not part of that discussion, but then I say, well, I'm really close with this cousin who raised me, you know, they're not even included on this list. Or, you know, my dog is dying and that's way more important to me than my brother, you know.
Yeah.
So there is a definite distinction here. I mean, they're absolutely listed, who's included. I think that being in line, I don't have a problem with that at all. I just wonder or worry about, okay, well, if we elevate those other family members to immediate family status, then are we, you know, is there an argument to be made for others as well? Like, well, what about this
There could
person?
be, you're right. But, you know, it's a living document, which means it changes.
It's true.
Someone brings something before the board that can justify it, we need to look at it.
And I think 3 days, if your mom or dad passes away, that's, you know, that's not
That's
getting
not enough.
anything done. No, you know, that's really not. So,
But yet-
so, you know, we're trying to find a balance there of,
But when I think about my in-laws and I think about my parents, I'm telling you what, both of them has as much influence in my life as they did. So You know, it would been great to have the same amount of time. So,
Sure.
and I don't, that's my only bid is same amount of time. I don't care if it's 3 or
Well, then,
5.
I'm
If
good
there's
with that.
somebody that's missing, a category that's missing, then let somebody come forward and justify it through Gary's office or to us, so we can talk with Gary about it.
And I
And-
just want to be clear, I don't recall a time. I mean, we're talking about the additional leave time and like I said, through COVID, we had this a lot
Yeah.
where some people, especially that were traveling with the travel logistics, getting people, family members moved and funerals scheduled, it was a couple weeks, and so, I think most of the department heads and elected officials have been really good in terms of permitting the time off and being flexible, especially with times that were really difficult to get those times of things scheduled. And so we're talking about, I think we're doing a good job there. The question is, how much do we want set aside for that?
For that, yeah.
Yeah.
I think the area you're talking about, there was some emergency stuff that had to take place and
Yeah.
across the nation. It wasn't just here.
No, it was everywhere.
We
Yeah.
got it straightened out. We worked with it. We've got policies in place. Who knows what the next reason it'll be to have emergency leave for staff, but this isn't the same case. This is a case of, you know what? Who are we to say one group's more important than the other in people's lives? That's not our job.
Mary, Roy, what do you guys think?
Well, I would just say, well, then if it's that important, then put in-laws under family, immediate family, in-laws or outlaws.
Put that whole group underneath.
Yeah.
Just
I
put
agree.
in-laws or in-laws
And that'll
for
fix it
up,
too.
for
That's
up
super.
to 3 days.
Yeah.
So they might not need 3 days.
Good point. But at least there's the opportunity for the same group of people.
Yeah, I typically agree with most everything that's said. The only thing I worry about is when we started getting extended out to like cousins and aunts and uncles, could we be putting an undue if we give those up to 3 days, could we be putting an unintended stretch on some of our supervisors and those? Because you could have someone that has, I always joke that deaths come in 3, and I know it's not something to joke about, but you could, if we start extending out, are we going to start putting ourselves into some binds? And that's why I do like the letter C that actually says that, hey, within discretion of the department head of working with the HR director, that there is some flexibility that can be provided. And I think that really helps in these situations to be able to disseminate it. So I can see why we need to add some of those and to make them immediate family, but I don't know if all of those should be immediate family. So.
Yeah, I agree with that too, whatever that is.
So we've given you very little direction.
Yeah, I mean,
Just take 2. Because we've already identified they qualify for leave 1 day, but yet we're saying they're not as important to people as the immediate family listing in 1. Just take those listings, jam it all into 1, get rid of 2. Make it 3. I mean,
yeah, I mean, I have no problem with, we can certainly.
we've already
handle
identified
that.
them in that group.
Wow.
Not asking to expand the group. Only asking to take that group and move it up to 1 so they're treated the same. For me, sometimes those people in that second group are as important or maybe more important.
But
Get time to see. 'em.
Commissioner Lloyd, one thing that I guess I would say is I think your concern, especially when we now have families that are spread out all over the United States, can, pose some potential problems. But my instinct is that I think most department managers do as much as they can to work with people regardless of what we
Okay.
give them. Meaning, I think they're trying to, and you saw this over the last 2 years, especially, do as much as we can to accommodate the fact that families are more spread out, that at times things have been more difficult to put together services for family members, and they've been granting the time off anyway, even if it were vacation.
Fair enough.
So I don't think operationally, I don't sense that that's a huge issue. I think we can probably manage. I think they're managing it now.
Good point.
So I think we'd be okay if you guys are okay with, with the just combining those 2. I'm fine with that. I think
Thank you.
that's,
I think it's a good point that they're going to take they'll be taking the
agree.
time off anyway.
Right.
Because I was thinking like Roy, oh, we're gonna burden, but whether it's vacation or, so yeah.
Let's
I
be
think combining-
realistic. If your parents or somebody that you're responsible, and as you know, lots of people are responsible for their states and other things, you may have a day off here and there for a month.
Yeah.
You know, trying to get things, depending on how complicated those arrangements are. So, you know, it's just trying to find what's the reasonable bereavement part and what's, you know, just the business part and, you know, that. So yeah, the other thing I guess I would say is you kind of see why a lot of places have gone strictly to PTO programs where we don't care what the reason is, but you're confined to that. And so, you know, that's another thing we could wrestle with also if, you know, if there's a mind to take a look at that. There's good and bad of both.
I've
And
always favored that.
yeah, so if you know, if there were some support, that's something we could take a look at, then we can remove the definitions and figure out what that paid time off policy needs to be, and that's fine too. So. Anything else on that bereavement leave section?
Final question before, what would be court ordered leave? When would that be in?
Would be like if you have to be a witness.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you have that sometimes where you need to testify or you need to show up
Take a
for
deposition.
deposition or, yeah.
Okay, great, thank you.
Section 3 on the occupational injury and illness, I guess, I addressed this a little bit already, was just trying to make sure that what we were already doing is an alignment. This is mostly a procedural area. One of the things that we've probably had the biggest problem with, and which isn't, I think we've got addressed in here now, is the supervisors would typically sign off on a workers' comp report, and we hadn't even finished the investigation yet. So the way it is now, that the injury report will be completed by my office. So we do all of the injury reports to the division. And we only do that after we've completed the investigation, got all the facts on our side. So sometimes we go, yeah, it's work related, only to find out that all weekend they were pulling carpet and laying carpet in their house, and the back injury wasn't work related at all because they showed up with it. So we need that time. So I think we've got that addressed in here. And I think that's kind of an important one.
Good move.
The only other thing that is significant from a policy standpoint is, and we've been doing it because you have to practically, but we had 30 calendar days. So when someone's injured, we keep them whole for 30 days. A work-related injury, we keep them whole. And generally, as you know, almost all work-related injuries are resolved. There'll be a few that extend beyond that, but very few. We had that for 30 calendar days, but sometimes the need for leave is hourly. So we just changed that to 173 hours, which is the equivalent. That's what we've been doing as far as payroll practices anyway. So we just wanted to make sure that that's clear.
Everything aligns to 173 hours.
Yeah. And I think that'll clarify that issue. Section 4 on military leave. This is one that's kind of important because Wyoming's one of the few states that approves additional leave beyond what the federal laws require for employees to attend National Guard encampments. So that's 15 days. Again, sometimes that's a few hours here and there, so we give them the equivalent of that. But we wanted to make sure that that is in there and understand that that's an obligation that we have very little ability to restrict. And sometimes they are called up. We saw this during some of the past conflicts, 9/11 being one of them, where there was an immediate call up. We may not get orders for a week. And so we, want to make sure those folks are taken care of. We work with them to make sure that their health insurance benefits are continued and those types of things. That's one that's really important. It's important to be in here because a lot of people aren't aware of that. That's a statutory requirement in Wyoming. I had the privilege to work with Larry Bartleboard, who was the Veteran Services Director. He worked with the employer support of the Guard and Reserve. So I got to work with him on both sides, trying to coordinate employees going to leave. And as you know, law enforcement typically has lots of folks from the military that go into law enforcement. So we regularly have people going on National Guard training and other exercises. So we're pretty liberal with that. I guess this would be page 9. This would be the section under deferred comp, basically removing the specific reference because some of the deferred comp program rules are changed by them. What we had in there was a little too prescriptive, and there's rules that change on that. So it just says after reemployment, employee may be eligible to make additional deferral contributions in accordance with the deferred compensation plan. And obviously those rules are published. So it didn't make sense to be that specific. In our policy, as you know, the deferred comp program is either a private program or managed through the state. We don't make the rules for that in either case. So we just wanted to be clear about that. One that was kind of important that I think had been omitted a little bit in terms of being clear, which is under exceptions to reemployment. This is on page 10. There was some language about an employee and, an individual not being reemployed if they're disabled or no longer able to perform. The real issue is not the disability. The issue is not being able to perform the essential functions of the job with or without accommodation. And today we have lots of tools that are available to help us accommodate, allow people who could otherwise perform the essential functions. We're required to do that under the Americans with Disabilities Act. So we made sure and cleaned up that definition a little bit just to be more on target with what's required. That would be under F2. Really no significant changes to the Family Medical Leave Act. The only point that I just remind everyone is that the county chooses that, and that's a choice that we can make, that if you're eligible for family medical leave, you have to use any paid leave that you have. Otherwise, you'd end up with people out a year or 2 years and then still have family medical leave. They're required to use it if they have it available while they're on family medical leave. And then we also pay for a long-term disability policy. So if they can't come back to work, they can go on long-term disability, which we pay for.
So yes, use all your leave first.
No.
Family medical, no?
No. So you have a choice to make. If while you're on family medical leave, that's unpaid, that's not a paid leave.
Oh, okay, very good.
And the employer can choose, and we chose to say you will use it on that period. And then at the end of your 12-week family medical leave entitlement, if you're not able to return to work as part of our health insurance program, we pay for long-term disability. You would be eligible to move on to LTD. And that's kind of that point where you say, you either can come back to work or you can't. If you can't, we need to get the ability to replace you and get somebody on board with that. The 12 weeks isn't hard and fast. As you know, sometimes people need a little more time or they need to get to a doctor appointment to get cleared. So we work with that. But as a general rule, that's kind of how the structure is set up. And that's something that we'll address when we do some more training with the department heads. The family medical leave, I think, is more or less a restatement of the federal law. I don't think other than that point of us making a decision to use their accrued leave. And that's the, if you look down the bottom of page 13, this would be under section I. Once again, we restate that an employee may elect to use his or her own sick vacation leave if they elect to waive temporary total disability. Some employees have a ton of leave and they're injured. They're going to get 2/3 from workers' comp. If they want to use their sick leave or vacation, so they have 100% of their leave, we're fine if they want to do that. So this is just reasserting that once in a while people choose to do that.
Once they've used that, can they go back to the TTD?
They can. Yeah. You're always entitled to the TTD. We communicate so they're not eligible to get both. We let the division know that they've chose to do this. Obviously, we've had a few people obviously try to double dip, but That's it.
Can't believe that.
So, but yeah, so that's the major thing. What you're really trying to manage on that side in general is that the less dollars they spend out of workers' comp, the lower our rates stay. So in general, it's better for us to keep them working, keep them involved, keep, if they're willing to take their leave, that's all charges that don't go into your experience rating. So, and it's drawn down our liability because we have to offset all our sick leave, vacation with funds in our budget. So if they spend those down, that's good on that side and it helps them. So, so that's pretty good. Those were the major changes, I guess, within that section. Were there any specific areas? And Doc, I know you mentioned the bereavement, but are there other sections in there that there's some concerns about? Again, we'll have two more meetings. So if there are some that you see or think about later, feel free to bring them up. We'll try to wrap those up the first and second meeting in December to have those done. And we'll address those next 3, 9, 10, and 11 at the 11:15 meeting.
Great.
If there's any other.
Are you getting feedback from the department heads and elected?
On some of them, there's a few of those areas. These ones are things that have been around a long time, so people are kind of familiar with them. There were some of the first ones we did are things that people have stronger feelings are. So we'll continue to send them out and see. Some of these are pretty esoteric. I mean, be honest, we'll have department heads who've never had somebody on workers' comp because you're in an office. So that's not something they're really attuned to, where sheriff's department, road and bridge, maintenance will have, that's something that's more important to them. So, okay.
Thank you.
Well, that's
Gary.
all I've got.
Excellent job.
Thanks, great.
Appreciate it. And we'll
Thanks
keep
for the feedback.
keep the wheels rolling.
Yep. We'll see you at next meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
Gary, thank you.
anything else here?
That was good.
All right.